everyone, welcome back to my channel for another week of Easter egg hunting and theory crafting in the Marvel Universe. Last week we saw Wanda expand the hex after Vision went outside of the boundaries and began falling apart. We also had the twins develop powers, and Wanda realized that Pietro was not her Pietro. This episode is a mix of Modern Family and The Office, both airing in the 2000s with these interview style scenes, but let's not forget who is in The Office either. Starting out this episode, Wanda is just not feeling it today. This scene reminds me of my mid to early 20s, but we're not here to talk about that. Things are glitching, which could be linked to her not having the power to sustain this larger hex, or that she is just too in her feelings to care, or that she doesn't have total control. I wouldn't be a real YouTube Easter egg hunter if I didn't point out that the hexagons are on the comforter as well. Tommy and Billy are beginning to notice the glitching as well with their games. Their controllers switch from the Wii to the Nintendo 64, back to the old Atari joysticks, to then Uno cards, which could be a reference to Monica Uno in Captain America with Talos' daughter. Billy is also confused about his powers and says that his head feels weird. With the telepathic powers, it would make sense that this is overwhelming and confusing. Wanda eventually comes downstairs and gets herself some cereal. Milk has kind of been a thing since back in episode 2 with the Bova milk ad, which is a callback to her and Pietro's stepmother in the comics that is literally a cow. But here we see that the bottle is changing its container and eventually lands on a carton with a missing child photo. There's no real way of knowing who this child is, but I am not sure that the individual kid matters, but this could explain where all the kids came from last week, why there were missing kids posters in the Spider-Man 3 stuff, and may just be foreshadowing Wanda's own kids missing later in this episode. We also have a weird scene later with the kids chained together out in the middle of nowhere. I'll get to that more when we get to that scene, but it was very weird to me. The cereal box itself has a fun nod to the circus that is now on the edge of Westview, and anytime we see the word snap, we know what they're talking about. I thought the back of the box was equally interesting with the maze. It could represent the maze that Vision and Darcy seem to be going through, trying to get back to the town of Westview. The title sequence is all about Wanda. Literally. There is an Easter egg here with the 122822, which is the S.H.I.E.L.D.'s designation for the planetary event known as Pulse in the video game featuring Reed Richards. So while we don't actually see Reed this episode, it doesn't mean that we aren't going to learn something about him. Or this could just be that it's Stanley's birthday and both are referencing that. I thought the erased heart in the chalkboard was sad, like her heart is broken or she just wants to forget about her heart, but we do see the heart again on the coffee mug and on the calendar, and now on Friday the 10th. Friday the 10th is an interesting date. If you remember, there was a calendar all the way back in episode 1 on Wednesday, August 23rd, marked with a heart. We know that that was the dinner date that she was having with the hearts, but the date is also the date of the Mora witch trials in Sweden. We know that Agnes mentioned that her and Ralph's anniversary is June 2nd, which lines up with the Salem witch trials. If you look at Wednesday the 23rd, the next Friday is the 10th of November, which is the day that the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sank, succumbing to the November Witch. The November Witch are caused by intense low atmospheric pressure over the Great Lakes, pulling cold Canadian Arctic air from the north or northwest and warm Gulf air from the south, which cause like these huge hurricane force winds. I live in Ohio. It's pretty crazy. Plus, we are now in November in the show, since the last episode was All Hallows Eve, the witch holiday. This cryptic note in the middle, I know what you are doing, Wanda. This could be coming from Vision, who has kind of been trying to figure out what Wanda's been doing this episode, but it could be some from other source that kind of knows that this is all her, More and more Wanda, and more, with it landing on a final image which is styled similarly to Modern Family's logo. On the outside of the hex, we have Hayward and some unknown agent. There are a few things we learned from this conversation. One is that they are now 8 miles outside of the hex. It seems like he's taking things a little more seriously after the last expansion, and they are no longer receiving any messages or feeds from the inside, likely from the thickening of the border like we'll see with Monica later. But the biggest deal is that they are planning to attack or launch today. We didn't see that in this episode. I imagine this will start in the next episode, which begins this final battle everyone has been talking about, with everything that is set up on the inside that is really making for this multi-layered confrontation finale. And what used to be the sword base, now turned circus, Vision wakes up a whole man after nearly being ripped apart last episode. I love that Darcy being chained to a car turned into her being a chained escape artist, like she was never going to stay in those cuffs. Phil Dunphy would be proud she accomplished the butler's escape. Back with Wanda and the boys, they talk about Vision, and Wanda isn't too concerned with finding him at the moment. She doesn't have answers about Pietro, except that he's definitely not her brother. And we see that she is finding all of this to be meaningless, and she's basically a depressed mess. In comes Agnes to the rescue. Well, she comes in. She offers to take the boys for a while so Wanda can have this free time that she desperately needs. Agnes does make a joke about not biting the kids. Well, except one time she did. And then she whisks the kids over to her house. Wanda's experiencing more glitching. The plant that Agnes gave her in the last episode changes, and then the TV, and it's all just getting out of Wanda's control. And it's clear that she doesn't know what's happening, what's causing this. She's just confused. Back on the outside, Monica and Jimmy head to meet with the aerospace engineer. On the way, Jimmy reads the emails he got from Darcy pre-Hex, which explains the weapons program Cataract. Turns out Hayward is not trying to dismantle Vision, but he's trying to bring him back online. Something Wanda could achieve, at least within the confines of the Hex. It also explains to them why he is so desperate to get his hands on Vision. Then they meet the team, and we were so excited, only for us to see Major Goodner. There was no big aerospace engineer, at least not yet. She could be a Skrull. In fact, I bet she is a Skrull, but I guess we'll have to find out later. She does make a comment about being loyal to not only Maria, but someone else as well. I'm assuming she means Monica. They deliver the space rover that Monica designed to get her back into the Hex, and I tried to find something for the 9219R, but no luck. So if you have any ideas, be sure to comment them below. Back to the circus, Darcy, like everyone else, does fall victim to the mind control of the Hex, but after a short conversation with her thinking, Vision is asking her out. He wakes her up like he did Norm and what we thought he did to Agnes. She promises to give him answers, but first they have to escape the circus. I think it was funny that she promised him answers, but then the first two questions he asked about the kids and then Pietro, she had no answer for. I think that the hula skirt girl here may be a reference to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We have had other references to them back with the Hydra soap, and this could be from season 1 before Jay-Z Johnson was part of S.H.I.E.L.D. She lived in her van known as Sky as a hacker, and she had a hula girl in her van. It was a big thing in season 1 of S.H.I.E.L.D. In the commercial this week, we had an interesting ad for an antidepressant called Nexus. This episode has talked about Wanda's depression and pointed out that she may or may not be the center of the world. Some of the wording here is interesting. It mentions anchoring back to reality or reality of your choice, with side effects like confronting your truth, seizing your destiny. And the last bit says, the world doesn't revolve around you. Or does it? The confronting the truth mimics what Monica will say to her later about owning your truth, and Wanda's destiny is being a Nexus being, with the antidepressant itself being called Nexus. All this points to the multiverse and Wanda being a Nexus being, which I'll talk about more in depth after we get to the Agnes stuff. Over with Agatha, Tommy, and Billy, it seems like they're having a good time with their friendly neighborhood auntie. They're eating sandwiches, playing with Senior Scratchy, and watching TV. The big moment from this scene is that Billy basically tells Agnes about his powers. He does this by telling her that being with her is quiet, that she is quiet on the inside. Up until now, Agnes has not been present for the powers. The look on her face basically tells us that this is an important moment. She does mention Ralph again, and that he says that she likes to sugarcoat things. I think this might be a little Hansel and Gretel joke about siblings that are taken by a witch after eating her sugar-coated house. Back with Monica and her team, Monica attempts to break the barrier with the rover, but it is not letting her pass. Major Goodner explains that the barrier is matching her density. Monica does escape the vehicle before it's totally ejected. I love that half of it was rewritten in the TV reality, and instead of taking the time to come up with a plan B, Monica just runs headfirst into the Hex, and we see her transform into what will either be Photon or Spectrum. the character Monica is in the comics. I love that we hear the same conversation she heard when she was waking up from the snap, and these are milestone moments from Captain Marvel for Monica. Once on the other side, we see that her vision has this multicolor effect, and she can now see the waves of light, or CMBR radiation. I'm sure they'll explain to us more about how her powers work in the MCU, but once she's beyond the barrier, she gets her focus, and then she runs in the direction of the town, getting there well before Darcy and Vision. However, Darcy and Vision do have time to have a chat about Vision's background and Wanda's suffering and state of mind. I love that she also includes just how much she knows they love each other, which I think is going to stop pitting Vision against Wanda, and he'll start fighting for and with her. Darcy truly is an MCU matchmaker. They do run into several obstacles keeping them from getting into the town of Westview, like unannounced road construction, stoplight, and those chained children. Vision assumes that these are Wanda's doing, but I think it's pretty clear that Wanda isn't controlling anything in this episode, and it is most likely Agnes attempting to keep Vision away from Wanda and the kids. By the end of the episode, Vision remembers that he can fly and doesn't have to deal with this, but in like Agnes' theme song, it might just be too late. The fourth wall breaks here for Vision in a very Jim Halpert from The Office kind of way. This scene made me laugh hysterically. At this point, Monica runs into Wanda's house and is trying to explain everything to Wanda about Hayward, but Wanda just wanted one damn day to herself and isn't in the listening mood. She blasts Wanda out of the house, taking this argument to the streets. Here, Monica, I think, really touches Wanda. She tells Wanda that she doesn't think she is a villain, but that if things keep going this way, that Hayward is going to try to turn her into one. Wanda, though, is in a pretty dark place and feels that she may already have slipped to the dark side. However, Monica then begins telling her that she understands that she too is feeling this immeasurable grief of losing someone that was your whole world, but she has to embrace it because it's her truth, just like the Nexus commercial. It is at this point that Agnes intervenes to stop any further conversation, and she takes Wanda to her home, leaving Monica on the street. The Shady Mailman, Dennis, is back for the scene, as well as Dottie. The mailman has a rabbit on his hat, which makes me think of Senior Scratchy, with this company name being Presto. The actual definition of Presto is used to indicate the sudden appearance or occurrence of something, often as if it's by magic, which is basically everything in the show. But could this also mean that Dennis the mailman has magical roots as well? I don't know. Something else, we'll have to wait and find out. Dottie was briefly in this scene, and we still know so little about her. She was never identified by SWORD. Her picture didn't even appear on the board. Here she is just taking care of her roses. Agnes has referred to her before as being the key to the town, a queen, and that her roses bloom under the penalty of death, but her time has just been so limited, it's hard to really peg down who she's supposed to be. I do know that a common theory is that she's Arcana Jones or Moonglow from the comics, because both Arcana and Dottie are married to a Phil Jones, and Dottie did seem more aware of Wanda in the scene at the pool club. Now to Agnes's for the big ending here. So she's with Wanda and Monica in the scene I just talked about. She brings Wanda into her home, and almost right away, Wanda realizes that the twins are gone. There is evidence that they have been here. We have the half-eaten sandwiches and the TV playing Yo Gabba Gabba, which as a mother, I can just say that Yo Gabba Gabba does suck your soul, just like Yo Magic from last week. There was also this big ass bug on the curtain. This, I think, is a nod to Beelzebub. A popular title for Beelzebub is the Lord of the Flies, and he was worshipped under the form of a fly, but is more modern day Christianity. It's simply another name for the devil, or in this case, Mephisto. Yes, I took it there. We also briefly see Senor Scratchy in his cage. Wanda asks about the twins, and Agnes tells her they must be in the basement. Wanda then heads to the basement, where she doesn't find the boys, but instead finds Agnes's witchcraft chamber. We see the aspect ratio change here, which kind of lets us know that Wanda has left the Hex temporarily and is now in some other area. I think that this is a nexus point, which I'll talk about here in a minute. We have a lot of demonic things here, like Ram's head. There are glyphs in gold up here, and they stand out, so I'm sure they have meaning, whether or not will know what that meaning is. I don't know, but they are outlined in hexagons, and hexagons, you know, are very important here. Skulls and dead things just over here. This is definitely an evil satanic layer. I think the biggest deal is the book. Some say this is the Darkhold from the comics. I'm not 100% sure. We have seen the Darkhold on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and on Runaways. Now, those have kind of been pushed out of canon according to Kevin Feige, but I don't know if they'd redesign the book. I do think that this has ties to Doctor Strange, and that's how we will get him here. Definitely one of the Ancient Ones books or something like that. You can see that it's radiating energy, so it's obviously powerful. Then in comes Agnes with Senior Scratchy revealing finally that she is in fact Agatha Harkness from the comics. I think the fact that she made sure to bring the rabbit will play into some significance. She does have a cat familiar in the comics named Ebony, so it could be that, or there's a theory that it's actually her son, Nicholas Scratch. Like, we need the rabbit, obviously. The rabbit's important. So then she locks them in together and puts Wanda under some type of spell. I like that her magic is purple. I mean, that's her color from the comics, but I like that they're using it to designate whose power is whose. So hers is purple, Wanda's red, and then we see that Monica's powers are blue. And I like that color coding. I don't know why, I'm just weird. Then we have the It Was Agatha All Along song with a very Munster vibe. We watch as she walks us through her pulling these strings, manipulating Wanda and Vision. Just the changing in her expression sometimes is just so amazing. I think the most interesting line here is when it says it's too late to fix anything, right in the conversation she was having with Vision. And if you go back to last week's episode, she actually said all was lost in that conversation. And then the last line of the episode is her admitting to killing Sparky, that witch. And then we finally have a mid-credit scene. It wasn't quite Marvel without one, you know. In this scene, we have Monica heading to Agatha's house, snooping around. She does access the basement from the outside, and we see now that the vines are glowing the purple color, so something's happening inside. Monica's eyes are purple, so she could be under Agatha's spell or using her powers, which reflect what color she's seeing. I don't know. I don't know, but her eyes are purple. And then we see Pietro come up behind her, confronting her as a Snoopy McSnooperson. Before we wrap up this video, I do want to talk about the Nexus and what I think Agatha's plan is. Well, what is the Nexus and what is the Nexus being? Well, the Nexus is like a gateway to other realities. Think multiverse. Nexus beings are exceedingly rare people and have abilities to affect the future and alter the flow of the universal time string. The Nexus beings act as the foundation of the multiverse and are crucial to the ultimate stability. One Nexus being alone exists on each of the parallel worlds of the multiverse and personify the character of their respective realms and serve as an anchor to the reality, just like the commercial said, anchor to reality. Nexus beings also produce unbelievably powerful offspring. It was mentioned in the comics that any child born of the Scarlet Witch would be powerful enough to stand among the great forces of the universe and rock the cosmos itself. Basically, they're badasses. I think that what is happening in this hex is the Nexus, where all these realities meet. We know that Agatha is after Wanda's incredibly powerful children, making me think that she knows that Wanda is a Nexus being. Like in most demonic witchcraft stories, they typically sacrifice children in a pact with the devil, so we could be looking at her wanting to sacrifice Tommy and Billy to bring back her dead husband Ralph, her son Nicholas Scratch, or to raise Mephisto from his realm, or a combination of those. Maybe Ralph is her husband and she's trying to open the gateway to bring him to this reality. There are a lot of reasons to be excited about what has happened in this episode. For one, this could actually be Fox's Quicksilver, but is being controlled or manipulated by Agatha. This is also going to tie in nicely to Loki, since the Time Variance Authority and the Timekeepers monitor these Nexus beings and the universal flow of time. And we know from the trailers that Loki does get caught up with them and is going to be like a Time Heist style show. Loki isn't a Nexus being in the comics, but we could see that play out in the MCU. So that's all I have for you guys. I know these are long videos, but there's just so much. Every single line has some importance, kind of everything is important. So these are long videos, and I thank you for sticking with them. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I also have a podcast. You can find me on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple. We do Marvel Mondays, and then we do DC Thursdays, and starting next week we're going to do Walking Dead Wednesdays, so check me out there as well. And then I do also post daily to my blog at www.maydaybaggy.com.